Hello everybody, welcome back to Tree Spice Media. Got another climbing video here for you today. And let me take you through a little scenario. You're getting set up to go climb some tree. Maybe it's a big silver maple that you're going to do some pruning on. Big, expansive canopy. You've got your line set, you put your device on, made sure you had your backup knot thrown in the rope, and you get up into the tree. You're having fun, moving around. You go to redirect to reach another part of the tree, and you're just tailing your line through the redirect, and all of a sudden, boom, you stop. Something's happened, and you look up and you realize that your backup knot has gotten stuck in the crotch of the tree. Now, you might be able to jiggle it out, or it might be really stuck, and you have to go all the way back to your backup knot to free it from the tree. Now, how can you prevent this? One way would be to just not back up the end of your rope, which is a terrible idea. Don't do that. You should always, in any kind of work positioning where you're rappelling on a fixed line or dynamic line, you should always have some kind of backup knot so that your device can't be released from the end of the rope and you fall to your death or to your very sore bottom. But you can understand how, with your standard stopper knot, like a barrel knot like this, it's pretty large, it's pretty bulky. If you're smart about how you redirect, it's likely going to pass through everything. But honestly, the most common time it gets stuck for me is if I just move between two stems and the stems come together to an included bark area, and it'll just go deep in that and just get stuck, and you can't, if you're too far out horizontal of it or below it, then you have to either ascend to jerk it up and out of there or go all the way back over and pull it out. There aren't a whole lot of alternatives to this. Something you could do with ropes with a super soft hand would be to maybe throw in like 2 overhand knots or something, but the rope has to have a soft hand so that these stay dressed properly. Like if you have a really rough kern mantle rope, this knot could easily come untied, especially if it's not being weighted all the time and moving around constantly. So maybe throw in like 1 or 2, or just use a barrel knot. That's the most reliable thing to use. How could you stop this from happening? Now, one of the things I've been doing is when I originally bought this rope, came with a sewn splice. Sewn splices are all right. For the most part, I hate them. For me, they're only good for one thing, and that is backing up your rope. I don't like them for climbing because they get stuck more often than spliced ends when you're pulling them out of the tree. And they don't work with a lot of cambium savers. And so for that reason, if you're doing double rope, it's really great to go with something that's spliced. Spliced is the way to go. I just like it so much better, looks so much cleaner, more artisanal than something that's just sewn. But what I realized was I didn't want my backup knots to keep getting stuck, and this happens a lot, especially if you use short ropes like me. Like this is only a 75-foot rope, and I love using this rope for pruning all kinds of trees. But I do find the backup knot gets stuck a lot, especially when you're redirecting a lot and moving all the way through the tree. There's so many places for it to get hung up. So if you have something like this is a lot more low profile, and I would highly recommend that if you can splice your own ropes, or if the retailer you're buying from will cater to this need, it is so awesome to splice it at one end and then have it sewn at the other end as your backup. The only thing is, if you do get a double braid rope, it is going to milk up at this end. But if you're not using this end anyways, if this is just your backup, it's kind of fine to have all this bunching down here. In fact, it'll stop you earlier before you even get to this, which can be kind of nice. But yeah, that's something that's just super awesome, is being able to have a rope that's spliced at one end and sewn on the other as your termination, because you can see this has a much lower profile than, say, a barrel knot like this. And again, with those included bark areas, this is still likely to get stuck, but slightly less likely. It's quite a bit smaller. But something I was thinking about is, man, I can't sew. So if I have all these other ropes that I like, how am I going to terminate them so I don't have to use a backup knot in the end? One of the ideas I had, which looks terrible and is terrible, is on this adjustable friction saver that I made with a Teufelberger steel ring, and then just or steel thimble, and then an ISC steel ring. Got those from our obsession. I did not want this getting stuck, So it does not have a backup knot in it. Instead, it has a whipped end. You can see this is 5 different whippings. Now, this is not a good idea. It has not been tested, other than however I've done it. And I would recommend that you don't do this. But it has worked so far. And if it's a little bit dodgy, if I'm up high and I'm like, I don't care if it gets stuck, then I'll just put a knot in it. Usually I put a knot behind the prusik anyways, because that part's gonna get stuck anyways. So just in case, I like to put a knot in anyways. But you know, it's kind of a fun idea, right? I'd like to get it tested to see how much you could pull a prusik over this before this would all just shear away. But it's kind of a fun idea. That's an alternative, not a recommended one. A sewn end is way more recommended. But something else is that pretty much any rope you can splice at both ends. However, it doesn't work out as well for some other ropes. The first rope I ever spliced at both ends was a 16-strand rope. And the reason you can't splice, you can splice back spliced ropes like 16-strand or current mantle at both ends. If you can find splicing instructions for the current mantle, you usually have to make them up. When you're splicing a 16-strand rope, since it just buries and then overlaps the core at one place, these two can stretch apart from each other independently. So if some milking's introduced, then it can just spread apart and elongate just a little bit. Whereas with a 24-strand rope, when slack gets introduced, it's going to try to pull, since the core is going to want to go this way and the cover is going to want to go this way, it's going to try to pull the splice even tighter closed. So if you want to back up a 24-strand with a splice, which I'll talk about how well that works in a second, but if you wanted to back up a 24-strand with a splice, first you have to climb on it a lot and milk out as much of that cover slack as possible and just cut off all the cover that pops off the end. And then you can put a splice on, but sometimes you're still going to introduce milking and it's going to want to close the eye more. So for that terminated end, what I would recommend you do is splice a slightly larger eye than you would necessarily want to use. And you could either put something in it to make it safer and like actually foolproof, like say putting in a small ring, maybe an aluminum one, not a steel one. Or I was thinking about maybe a great idea if you wanted to use that splice again at some point would be to put in something removable, like a DMM shackle, or honestly even like a hardware store shackle. But something like that, that's still going to be pretty low profile, and you can just screw it in there and pop it out if you want to put a carabiner through this and use it for captain hook or some work positioning on the other end of your line or something. Now, I wanted to see though, if I could just use the running end of the splice as my termination. Nothing in the hole, nothing to back it up, just this width of the splice to stop me. And since the only rope I have spliced on both ends was the 16 strand, I have this orange whip lock, which was my main working end, and this black end, which is just my terminated end. And it did kind of work. With the vices, this is pretty foolproof because the rope runner will not go over this throat of the splice. It just gets gummed up anytime it gets even close to this. I would assume the same would be for the akimbo or the unisender. Granted, none of these methods are in any way tested or approved. These are just some stuff I've been messing with. It's kind of a fun idea. Get that hair out of here. It did kind of work. It kind of felt like running over sap when you had hitch cord, and it wasn't really confidence inspiring because I used it with the rope wrench and I also used it in a double rope configuration with 10 mil hitch cord. With smaller hitch cord, obviously it would probably clamp on a little bit more. So it would get to about here and then get gummed up, and then I could work it down until the bottom of the hitch was like maybe here-ish. It usually didn't get far past the whip lock, but you know, it made you feel like you could work it off farther, and if there was a lot more weight on it, like if you fell onto that or something, that you would probably just pass through. And also, you know, hitches aren't really made to be used like that, except for maybe like a Blake's hitch and a backup knot. Usually you want your backup to be hitting the pulley, and that's what's stopping it. But with any of these slimmer ones, usually it's going to be butting up against the hitch cord. That's what's going to be stopping it. The answer is it kind of works to just use a splice as a backup. Would definitely recommend finding something removable to put in here. But this is such a cool option. and it's so much more low profile than this that I hugely would recommend this. And just put a little something in the eye to keep you from backing off the end of it. And again, this is going to work with some ropes better. For example, on a 24 strand rope, a Yale 24 strand rope or Samson 24 strand rope, since you don't change the core when it's in the eye, this is going to be double the rope diameter right here. So it's going to be much harder to pass over this and the throat of this splice than it is going to be on the 16 strand rope. For example, I grabbed some calipers because I was curious. This 16 strand rope, it's about 13 millimeters somewhere on the standing part of the rope. Now if we come up to like the main throat of the splice, it is 18 millimeters. So we got about 5 millimeters to play with, which not the same as like a sewn splice where it goes from like 11 millimeters to 24. So factor at 2. But let's say on a 24 strand rope you got 11.7, which is what this rope is supposed to be, to 17. So here you're working with, or 17.7. So you're working with closer to a factor of 7 than a factor of 5. So you get 2 more millimeters, which maybe makes this just a teeny bit safer. But yeah, it was a fun idea. Definitely not a proven way to terminate the end of your line. But just wanted to show you something I've been playing with. So it gums up the hitch a little bit. It's not gonna, it'll likely stop you, but it might not. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But do take away that this is a super great idea to buy a sewn end for the end of your rope, because it's just really nice to not have to throw in a backup knot. So if you're having that problem with your backup knot getting stuck, I would highly recommend to get yourself a rope with a sewn termination on the end so that you can use that instead of a backup knot. It is incredibly useful and would highly recommend that you do it. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and please let me know if you have had any other luck with maybe uncommon ways of terminating the end of your rope, other than just using such a ridiculously long rope that there's no way you could run out of rope, which is an approach some people do take. Thanks so much. See you later.